Hi guys, and welcome back to my YouTube channel. Today you won't get to see my pretty face because we are working through an income tax return. So basically, once you have inserted your username and password into SARS e-filing, this is your landing page. This is where you would land. And what you want to do here is you want to navigate to the left side menu and click on Returns Issued, which will open up a sub menu, and then you click on Personal Income Tax. Once you click on Personal Income Tax, you will get to this page. Now on this page, you select the year that you want to submit and you click on Request Return. That will populate the year, and then you click on Open. Once you click Open, you will land on this page. Now on this page, you click on My Tax Return. And once you click on My Tax Return, it will open up the income tax return, which is this. The income tax return, as you will see, is divided up into different subsections. The form wizard, taxpayer information will work through each one by one and until we complete the entire income tax return. Now, opening up the form wizard, you'd need to click on the bar, anywhere on the bar, that on the form wizard bar, and it will open up to the form wizard, where you would need to answer yes or no to all of the questions depending on your circumstance. So if, for example, we can go through a couple of questions. The first one reads, is this declaration made by a tax practitioner? You would answer no if you're completing your own tax return. I, on the other hand, if I'm completing a client's tax return, I would answer yes. And so you go through all the question. If we look over to say the last question on this page, were you unemployed for any period during this year of assessment? So if you were unemployed during this period, March to February of this particular tax year that you filing, then you would select yes, you were unemployed, or you would select no if you're employed for the full tax year. And so the questions go, you just answer yes or no depending on your circumstance. And then once you've answered all of the questions, it'll take you back to the menu where you will see some menu items opened or some menu items no longer available. So depending on how you answered. So if you answered yes, you will see that menu item available. Where you answered no, that menu item would not be available. And then moving on to the next two sections, the taxpayer information is where you would record your personal details, your name, ID number, your address, and contact details. The next section is where you would record your banking details. And then this you can amend as they change. So if your information has not changed to the information that was on your return the previous year, you just leave it as is and you just confirm that it's the same. But if it's changed, you would then update the information accordingly. Now, moving on to the next section, let's look at the IRP5 section. So again, click on anywhere on the bar on the IRP5 bar, and then it will open up the IRP5. Here, the only thing you would really normally need to do is to just check that the numbers on the IRP5 are the same as the IRP5 that you would have gotten from your employer. So the only thing really you need to do is just check that the numbers are correct, and it must be a mirror image of the document that you would have received from your employer. And then for the purposes of the example, I want to take a look at another income source. Say, for example, you've got a property that you're renting out and you receive rental income. So you would have answered yes in the form wizard where it asked about rental income, and then this section where you can declare your rental income would be available to you, where you put in your description. Say you've got a property in Sandton, you would put in Sandton apartment, for example, and then the amount of the rental income that you received. And then what you can do is you can list any expenditure that you incurred in respect of that rental property, and you would note the expenditure over here and you put it in according to its category. So if you had an accountant doing your books for the rental property, you'd put the amount that you paid your accountant under accounting fees. If your tenant is behind on their rent, you'd put that amount under bad debts, etc., etc. If your property is in an estate, you would then also put in the levies that you pay to the property managing agent. But I must stress that any amount that you put on anywhere on this return, as a matter of fact, needs to be backed up by supporting documents. Even more so, any expenditure items that you declare. Because should you be selected for audit, SARS would need to have a copy of that document, or that supporting document that supports the amount you put in your tax return. And if you don't have it, SARS will disallow that expenditure. SARS will charge you a penalty for overstating your expenditure, and it's not pretty. So make sure that every single amount that you put on a tax return is true, is correct, and it's backed up by supporting documentation. And then you will see that the form will auto-calculate your profit or your loss for the rental property. So basically the form would take your rental income less your declared expenditure, and it will auto-calculate whether you have a profit or a loss in respect of your rental property. Now, moving on to the deductions, the first deduction that I want to look at is medical deductions. So if we look at medical deductions, the first question is, were you the principal or main member of a medical scheme? If you were the principal or main member of a medical aid, you would answer yes and fill in your medical aid details. If you were not, but you've got medical expenditure that you want to claim, you would still answer no. You would answer no in this question, and then you would not have the medical scheme section available because you don't belong to a medical aid. So say you belong to a medical aid, you answer yes to the question, you would then need to fill out the medical scheme name, your membership number, and then further down the form you would need to complete the number of dependents on your medical aid for the full tax year. Again, March to February. Remember, everything you fill in on the form is in respect to the 1 March 2020 to 28 February 2021 period. That is including the rental income that we looked at earlier. So you fill in the number of dependents, and then you would then fill out a little further down on the form, you'd fill out the contributions made to the medical aid, as well as any expenditure that you made that was not covered by the medical aid. And then once again, this, whatever you fill in on this, should be a mirror image of the medical aid tax certificate that you would have received from your medical aid. With the exception, of course, of the medical expenses, that code 4020, that would be the receipts that you have on hand. You tally them up and then you put that amount and you keep your receipt as proof to SARS that that's your medical expenditure. And then there's other items which you can claim with regards to medical expenditure that's in relation to physical impairments and disabilities. That's quite an extensive topic to cover in just this intro video. If you are a person living with a physical impairment or a disability, or you've got dependents that are living with physical impairments or disability, feel free to contact me with regards to what options you have in filling out your tax return if you are in that situation. And then I want to quickly move on to the next deduction, which is retirement annuity fund contributions. So if you belong to a retirement annuity, you would have received a tax certificate from your retirement annuity fund. And then once again, you just populate the details as they appear on your retirement annuity tax certificate. The name of the fund, the policy number, and the contributions made to the policy. Again, keep your supporting document, because should you be selected for audit, SARS will request a copy of your tax certificate, and it needs to reflect what you punched in on your tax return. And then if you are an individual who has a travel allowance at your employment, you can then make a travel claim against your travel allowance. Remember, your travel allowance that you receive at your job would be sitting as an income item on your tax, or rather on your IRP5, and then you would then need to submit either a logbook or slips that would counter that income, so basically reduce that income so you pay less tax. So you can do this in one of two ways. Either you can keep a logbook of your business travel, or you can keep slips of every single expense item that you spend on your car with regards to traveling for your employer. So I'll go through both. The first one is where you would have kept a logbook. So you would then answer yes. Did you use a logbook to determine your business kilometers traveled? You would answer yes. And then you go through the questions. Indicate whether the vehicle was acquired by way of, so that sentence, if you click on that arrow, continues to say by way of cash or installment sale agreement, I think it says. But you would select the applicable option depending on how you purchased your vehicle. Then you complete your vehicle registration number, your car make, your car model, the date when you bought your car, and the cost price or the cash value of your car. And then you move on further down the form, and it asks for your details, the details of the kilometers that you travel. So the starting date would usually be the beginning of the tax year, which is the 1st of March 2020, because we're looking at the 2021 tax return as an example. So the 1st of March 2020 would be your starting date, and your closing date would be the end of the tax year, which is the 28th of February 2021. It is possible that the starting date could be different. An example where a starting date could be different is if you only purchase your car later in the year. Say you purchased your car in May, then your starting date would be the 1st of May 2020, for example, or 15th of May 2020, whenever you purchased your car. And also with the closing date, if you sold your car during the year, so you say you sold your car in August, then the closing date would be in August when you sold the car. And another example would be if you only started the job in the middle of the tax year. So the job that gives you the travel allowance, if you only started that in September, for example, then your starting date would be September 2020. Or if you left the job during the tax year, then your closing date would be when you left the job. And then your opening and closing kilometers, that's the odometer reading on that specified date. So your opening kilometers would be your odometer reading at that start date, and your closing kilometers would be your odometer reading at that closing date. And then the total kilometers, not 100% sure, but I think the form auto calculates the total kilometers. But if it doesn't, the total kilometers is basically your closing kilometers less your opening kilometers. And then you would then need to take out your logbook and tally up all your business trips, and then fill in the business kilometers. And then the form would auto calculate the rand value of the expenditure, which would go against your travel allowance. And then the other option is if you kept physical records of all your expenditure, then you would not fill out, you would click no where it asks if you kept a logbook, and you would skip all of that kilometers stuff at the top, and you would go here where you can put in the rand values of all your expenditure in respect of fuel and oil, maintenance and repairs, etc. But again, I'm going to keep stressing this. You must have paper documents of every single amount that you put on a tax return, because SARS will audit you. You will need to produce the supporting documents, and if you do not have it, your expenditure will be disallowed. You will get a penalty for overstating your expenditure, and it is not cute. Now, moving on to the next one, donations. So if you made a donation to a registered public benefit organization, you would click yes on the wizard where it asks about donations, and this section of the return would be available to you. So there's two kinds of donations that you could have made. You could have made a donation to the Solidarity Fund, or you could have just made a donation to any other registered public benefit organization. So you'd slot in your amounts depending on which organization you made the donation to. So if you made a donation to the Solidarity Fund between the period 1 April 2020 to 30 September 2020, you'd put in your amount there and the PBO number of the fund that you paid or you donated to. And if you made a donation to any other organization, you'd fill in the amount of the donation, their PBO number, and the total amount of the donation. So yeah, the total amount of the donation and the PBO number of the organization or organizations which you donated to. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the tax return. There are many other sections, many other income and expenditure items on the return, but this is just a basic intro video of how to submit your tax return. If you've got any specific questions, feel free to contact me. And then what you would do at this stage is you would either calculate, so at the top here you would calculate to see if your calculation, but remember the return is not submitted until you click submit. So if you opt to click calculate, it'll take you to another page where it'll show you your calculation. If you're happy with that, you can come back into the tax return and then click submit return to SARS. Thereafter, you'll get a notice of assessment indicating that your return has been submitted and everything is happy and everyone is compliant and the world is at peace. I hope that helped. Ciao.